So yeah, do you think there's anything else we need to cover regarding the marriage element?
No, just to stress that this issue focusing on Islam and the age of Aisha needs to be understood in a universal historical context where this was normal, traditional, expected, and also no one before, as far as I'm aware, until very recent times in the West, ever criticized this marriage.
Because the kings and queens of England and Europe were also, marrying people. You can actually look it up.
At a much earlier
as well. So 11, 12. And even today, in many states in America, marriage with parental consent is allowed at a much younger age than what is considered the norm. The cynical voices also would say, or maybe realistic voices, that increasing the age of marriage has been used especially by Western countries, as a tool in the East to reduce populations. Okay, because the later a child is born, the later a woman has a child, obviously she's going to have fewer children, right? Probably. And so some of these policies, they might suit some countries, but they've actually caused a lot of harm in other countries. So I remember one of our teachers was telling us, he's from Bangladesh, he was telling us that there's a railway station in Bangladesh where parents come and abandon their children.
Wow.
Because they're so poor, right? They will abandon their children. And the entire railway station is full of children. And he was telling us that every type of evil person can come to that railway station and take advantage of those kids, right? Get them involved in all sorts of crime, traffic them, prostitution, all of that stuff, right? Now, it's controversial to say in the West, but imagine from the point of view of a very poor family, if somebody agreed to marry your child, okay, that would be a form of safeguarding that child. Can you see how that would work for that in that context? And so those children who are being abandoned, that wouldn't take place to that at that level.
Yeah.
Of course, there can also be other solutions. And like I said, look, as you know, urf is a part of Islamic law, right? The idea of custom, the idea of norms. And if we look at our children today and we know that they're not mature enough, right, until a much older age, that's perfectly fine, And it's perfectly also fine for Muslim countries to put in laws that increase the age, It is allowed for them to do that because Islam doesn't prevent them from doing that if there is some kind of public benefit. Or if there's some reason that they're seeing.
It's an important point you're making, because often I hear from hostile critics of Islam, your religion permits you to marry children. Look at Aisha and so on. Well, apart from completely disregarding the context and historical understanding of the issues which you have labored to educate us about, it also disregards that key Sharia principle of the urf, the customs, which are a source of law. So the customs in, say, Britain are such that it's not the norm, the cultural norm, to do these things today. So we respect that law as Muslims. We live according to it. We don't defy it because in another very different context, different options would be available. No, we respect the law. It's a source of our own understanding of Sharia, and we are obliged to obey it. And so, there's a flexibility there.
Right. And also, I would look at the marriage as in, when they say the age of 6, for example, with Aisha, I would look at it more as a betrothal. More akin to a betrothal in the West. Yeah.
Right. Like an engagement, I suppose.
Islamically, technically is a marriage because it's a contract, right? However, like I said, it can be annulled if any of the parties are not happy with it once they reach puberty, right? So the point is that it's a different context, different time, different life expectancy. I mean, by the time you're 10, you've lived a quarter of your life. Like, just put it into that context, right? For the average person. So, we have. Go ahead.
No, I think another problem in the West is because we have not always, but very often a supremacist view of our role in the world, that we are the top dog. We know what's right. We're the best. We're superior, and that's often allied to implicit racist notions as well. So this idea of having a more understanding historical context, respecting difference, that other peoples do things differently in different cultures and so on, is not the dominant note, really. I get the impression that we just assume. So if we now define a human relationship in a certain way, whether it be LGBT or whether it be this, then this is now the new universal law that every society must conform to. And so, you know, British embassies around the world pressure local populations to come into line with the most recent European norms. And so we have this imperial supremacist attitude. And even the most liberal people, I've seen this in Germany and elsewhere, have this attitude, very much so. It seems to be everyone on the left. It's like in France, the secularist mentality is just as much on the left as it is on the right. You know, the superiority of secularism and how Muslims need to keep their
superiority complex,
keep their faith indoors and don't dare show your Muslim identity in public. I mean, it's very, very hostile. The same in Germany. So this supremacist thing is not even party political, it's right and left. Now, there are exceptions to this. There are a number of people who are much more better informed and they travel widely and they have a more tolerant understanding, but it's not the dominant view at all. So, and this is part of the problem, that if the so-called universalization of the Western view, which is just a parochial Western view, if other cultures then adopt it, say Muslims too, then we are, you know, we're undermining Islam, we're undermining our own heritage.
Absolutely, and it upsets the balance, you see, because our social situation is different. So imagine it in a Muslim country, the children are not sexually active, teenagers are not sexually active, right? And their parents, we don't want them to be, you know, we want them to get married if they're going to be. So imagine in that context now, if you introduce an age of consent that is quite high, right? If you say 18 or even 16, right?
Even 16,
and you have you have all of these young people who have reached puberty, they're having feelings, desires, right? They can't get married. So in a way, what about their human rights? What about their right to get married, right? And having grown up in quite a conservative family, I know that once I reached that age, I've been wanting to get married since I was about 12. I'm not even joking. Like, you know, I had that feeling that I wanted to get married from about the age of 12. And for a Westerner, that would be, oh, I want to have a boyfriend, right? Yeah. And my friends were having boyfriends. They had boyfriends. They had intimate relationships with them, everything. Yeah. But for me as a Muslim, it would be, I want to get married, right? Yeah. So in a weird sort of way, what about the human rights of the young people who want to find a chaste and a wholesome way to express their sexual desires, right? Which for religious people is within marriage. Do you see how the West, imposing the Western paradigm onto the East or onto the Muslim world doesn't work? Because the reason why Westerners don't mind is because they're handing out contraception in secondary schools, right? And literally, I remember girls in my they could go to the doctor without their parents knowing, get the pill, get different various contraceptive devices, and be sexually active without their parents.
So this is where the state's taking over for the parental role, denying the parents their rights to be parents, to care for and be responsible for decisions in their children's life. And the state takes over and denies the parents their rights. So it's not just the children's rights denied, the parents' rights are then denied, and the state takes over that role. And this is not liberalism, this is, you know, in its kind of nominal way it presents itself, freedom. This is an authoritarian kind of encroachment on something the state should not have any involvement in, and that is the parents and their children, I think. But yeah.
And the state is allowing and turning a blind eye to children having sexual relationships outside of marriage, right? But suddenly comes down hard on marriage, you know, on trying to do things properly in a wholesome way. But this is another thing. The idea of an older person having a wholesome marriage with a younger person is completely alien to the West now, right? Yeah. Like, whenever the idea comes up, in a Westerner's mind, they're thinking of a perverted situation that they've heard about in the news, right? Jimmy Savile, or I don't know, these figures, right? Like, they're thinking of these types of people, and they're thinking of disgusting situations that they've heard of and read about that are actually very much Western problems, right? In the grand scheme of things. And projecting that onto a wholesome marriage, which is what we're talking about here.